We live in an age with endless amounts of information. The challenge is no longer where to find information, but where to find the right information, easily and quickly. So, although it may seem that complexity requires more time and energy, it is simplicity that requires a great deal of effort and refinement. I never appreciated the effort that went into simplicity until I started design, and that's when I realized less is more. The more I learn about design and communication, the more convinced I am that less is actually more. I no longer need to be convinced, but as an instructional designer, it is often a challenge to convince very knowledgeable and experienced experts that less is actually more. So the challenge is how to explain why less is more, simply and effectively. In order to communicate a complex idea simply, it is often best to organize information visually. The Gestalt principle notes that learners focus on the big picture to understand the parts. Therefore, to communicate a complex idea, it's best to introduce an image which communicates the main idea first. The Gestalt principles also state that people tend to learn based on prior knowledge. Therefore, I would liken the idea of why less is more to widely known concepts and examples. Apple is an obvious but reliable example of how much time and effort is required to produce a simple and effective design. As you can see, it took 4 decades for Apple to get their simple and streamlined logo that they use today. Another great example of simplified yet complex design is the FedEx logo. It took over 200 designs and a lot of leadership review to arrive at the globally recognized logo known today. The excellent use of color and typography is impressive enough. It is the hidden element between the E and the X, which makes the arrow, that makes it truly genius. Another design which uses basic elements to capture and communicate a simple message is the World Wildlife Fund Panda. This design uses only one color and incomplete lines to create the image of a panda. The panda is an excellent visual because it's a well-loved and recognizable animal that is also well known for being endangered. Simplified design can be seen in many products over time as well. The Coke bottle has taken over a century to develop into the iconic shape we associate with the drink today. The concept for the shape developed from the designer's interest in communicating the product ingredients, so he designed the bottle from the shape of the cocoa pod. The Pepsi logo is another great example of the effectiveness of simplicity. We can clearly see how the Pepsi logo transitioned over time from complex and intricate typography to streamlined modern text to basic shape and color. I bet you never knew that the original McDonald's logo was a mix of basic text and lines. The design of the 50s logo is even more surprising. With a lot of text and shapes and a full character, the graphic would have never survived. It appears over time the focus was more on the symbolic color and shape, resulting in the iconic golden arches. The Ford logo is typical of many design changes of the years. The typography shifts from intricate and heavy text to modern and simplified text. The unneeded design elements also disappear, so that only the essential and recognizable elements are retained. Did you know that Amazon underwent a major redesign as well? I bet you never associated the online superstore with a river. Thankfully, over time, the image changed to produce a smile and to direct attention from the A to the Z, as in Amazon sells everything from A to Z. Design is taking over communication slowly and subtly in the form of newsletters, charts, process maps, etc. Author Dan Rome explains the concept of visual thinking in his book, The Back of the Napkin, in which he provides examples of why simple images are more effective than complex text. As with many design theories and methods, there is a process to developing visual communication. Dan Rome has broken the process down into 4 steps. Let's start with the look step. This involves taking in information without a filter. The next step is to see the information. This involves looking at the information for what stands out, what is familiar, and looking for patterns and gaps. This requires careful analysis, as well as the ability to see the information from many perspectives. This leads to the next step. Creating a quality visual is another process in itself. There are guidelines to take into account in the creation of the visual. At this point, the designer needs to ask themselves if the design is simple or complex. Is there quality over quantity? Is the vision clear? Is the individual meaning focused? And is this different or unique? At the imagine stage, we start to analyze where we can fill in the gaps, make patterns, organize and represent concepts visually, and whether or not we have enough information to move forward with the design. As with any good design, this may require several stages of change and a lot of feedback to refine the visual into the most simple and efficient way to communicate the information. At this stage, the visual should stand on its own, but it requires a planned and organized script to communicate the details of the visual. This also involves communicating the information to an audience. This requires practice and feedback in order to get over anxiety and focus on the content itself. Explainer videos are becoming a more common and popular method for digesting complex information. The images designed in these videos must be accurate, clear, and representative of the concepts. It is also important to consider when each image is presented so as not to overload the screen with images and information. The idea of infographics continues to grow as a simplistic way to communicate complex ideas. The success of these learning tools lies in their visual appeal and simplicity. However, the design of a good infographic is just as difficult as designing a good logo and relies on the same design processes and principles. As we can see, to create a simple design can take years and often decades of transition. Thankfully, there are principles and processes which can be applied. In applying these ideas to presentations, it becomes more clear that a well thought out image or series of images can be more effective than pages of text.